Hello, I am Daniel Thompson. Kind of weird that I always introduce myself that way. Like, you don't know who I am. Like, you don't look at the title of this podcast. And it's like, oh, who's this guy talking right now? I wonder. No, you pretty much know going in, but I'm still going to do it. So, yeah, hey, I'm Daniel. Some of you know me. Well, most of you probably know me as a journalist now. Some of you know me as a musician, but I feel like there's a good number, but a lot of people don't really know me as just a person. So I just wanted to take some time to go through the wide swaths of my life, kind of just looking at it objectively as me as a person, not paying too much attention to journalism, not paying too much attention to my race, not really paying too much attention to music, just things that are kind of just snapshots of what I've experienced just as a human being. So to start out, where do you always start with a life? I was I was born in what was then St. Luke's Hospital in Racine in the fall of 1989. My parents, Margaret and Milton Thompson, at the time, I believe my mother was 41. A 41-year-old woman decided to give birth and then keep me. That's, I guess, my life, I like to think, started with an act of love and mercy in that. And it continued throughout my life. My mother has been my biggest supporter throughout my life. And if she is one of my two favorite people in the entire world. Still to this day, love seeing my mother. Brightens my day up. Same with my father. So, my father, Milton Thompson, to kind of just so you have a proper image, my father is black and my mother is white. Um, my father, Milton Thompson, is known locally for his work in education, and so is my mother. So, my father worked for KUSD. He was the principal of a few schools here, including Wilson Elementary, for a time that one I remember well. He worked in central office, and then he moved on to be superintendent of Boyd schools and elsewhere in the state. At the same time, my father's also been a pastor. So when I was born, I was not only born into a tradition of educators, which went back generations, but also I was born into the church. So when I was born, I had, and I still have, three brothers. So I'm the youngest. So there's my brother Nate, there's my brother Matt, and there's my brother Tom, and then there's me. Um, just for a picture, if you saw us all standing side by side, you'll know me and Tom are related. You may equate me and Matt, probably not Tom and Matt, because it's funny. We are all different shades of black and white because we're all mixed. So it's interesting. Whereas I can walk through an airport without being profiled even a little bit, my brother Matt will get stopped every time, and I find it hilarious and unfortunate for him, but also he's my brother, so sometimes I find his misfortune funny. That's how family works. But I grew up in Racine on Monroe Avenue, right next to Silver Park. My early years, I was too adventurous, I think, for my own good. In fact, I marvel at the fact that I made it to adulthood. To kind of, so my dad would be off at work, and me and my mother would just kind of hang out throughout the day up until I went off to kindergarten. So for years, it's just me and my mom, either at the house or going on errands, which I remember the smell of the bread store we used to go to in Racine next to Regency, um, where Joanne Fabrics used to be, and where I think it's Pet Supplies Plus is now. I think that's the only store that's still around from when I was a kid in that area. Um, but that was our errand spot. Jo-Ann Fabric sucked the life out of me as a kid. Um, do not bring kids into that store. There's nothing for us. Nothing at all. And you can hear Jordan Baker, who I'll talk about later, kind of messing with stuff in the background because that's what she does. But no, Jo-Ann Fabrics, the only joy that I had was hiding in the little circular racks. Like I was going to go into Narnia every time or something like that. Um, but no, it was so I had a lot of time with my mother when I was younger. Not so much my older brothers and not so much my father. With my brothers, it was more of the age gap thing because when you're younger, age difference is more apparent. I was very much the baby. Um, but growing up in the house, we had at the time 2 birds. We had a dog, we had a guinea pig. Later on, we'd have cats, more dogs, an iguana nobody knew about, another cat nobody knew about, a ferret that most of us knew about, some rabbits, pixie frog, a tarantula at one point. Hmm. I think that's it. So, growing up, the fascinating experience in my house was dealing with the never mind. I'll go back to that. First, let's talk about all the ways I should have died as a child. So, I was curious, is the nice way of saying it. For instance, I remember the first time I ever made a friend was because I snuck out of my house, walked across the street, and walked to the house on the opposite corner because there was a kid standing in the lawn. And then I talked to him. His name was Michael Wright. Of course, my mom eventually figured out, like, hey, Daniel's like, he's gone. So she found me and I got yelled at and probably spanked. I was like, this is horrible. And then the next day, I believe, I got up and I was like, I kind of liked what I did yesterday. I'm going to do it again. So again, I sneak out of the house and this time I went left. And that's when I met my second friend down near the end of my block. His name was Kyle Price. So I was naturally curious and adventurous. I mean, nothing, danger wasn't really an aversion for me. And also, I was really stubborn. So my mother had to develop kind of this sense of me not being around anymore. She tells me stories of like she would be sitting talking to a friend at their house and she would just mid conversation look at her friend and just be like, Daniel's not in the house anymore. And they'd run around the house and I wouldn't be there. And then she would run outside and she would legitimately see me, a toddler, running as fast as I could towards a busy intersection, like a middle aged man that just lost all of his like funds and like retirement and everything. And she would have to just bolt and catch me before I hit them. That's what my brother had to go through with me. I also remember a time when me and my brothers used to go visit a family that lived on kind of a farm. And around there, they had a pond. And over the pond, they had a rope swing. So my brothers always had this practice of, swinging over the pond on the rope swing and, swinging back and jumping off. And my brothers made it a point to be like, hey, Daniel, don't let go of the rope. And I mentioned before, I was a very stubborn child and I'm still a very stubborn man. It's one of my biggest faults. So I remember them yelling it as I'm swinging over the pond. And in my head, all I could think was, screw you guys, I'm letting go. And I did. I almost drowned. So that's the level of stubbornness I've dealt with all my life. So you can see why I've run into some of the problems maybe I have. But going back to going back to the kind of my childhood, so I had a very weird mix of a childhood. So I mentioned that we had a lot of animals, and my brother Nate was the one really that snuck all these things in the house. Nate was like Dr. Doolittle. I don't know how to describe him. He just loved having animals around. And the funniest thing he ever did was sneak in a second black cat. So we had a black cat named Aaliyah, named after the singer. Um, and one day I wake up and Aaliyah would sleep with me. So I'm staring at Aaliyah at the end of my bed and I pet her and then I go downstairs to the basement where Nate was staying and where the laundry room was. And I go to grab fresh clothes and then I look over and there's a black cat looking at me. I'm just like, how did you get down here before me? So I grab clothes and I walk back upstairs and I look back in my room and there's another black cat. And again, I'm thinking, okay, this doesn't add up. Go back downstairs and I stare at this other cat. And then I notice that this cat actually has a gold collar buried somewhere in its black fur. I'm like, oh, you're a different cat. Nate snuck in another black cat because nobody would notice at first glance that there was another cat. He would do that stuff all the time. And I found it hilarious because it would take some time for my parents to figure it out. And I wasn't going to tell them because, well, I was the youngest brother. And a tattletale doesn't last long. So, um, the other part of my childhood so the way that I say it was a weird mix because I was always exposed to the real world while living in the fanciful world of childhood. So growing up in Racine, I used to hang out at Silver Park a lot because it was just down the block. It was at the end of my street, pretty much. And around the area that I grew up on, Monroe, about 2, 3 blocks to the east is a section we call Rubberville, which is what you would call a small ghetto, I guess. But it was lower income people, and the way you could tell you were in Rubberville is not only did the quality of the housing go down, as in the space between houses was smaller. You could tell that families were cramped together in smaller spaces on blocks, but the road also narrowed and it was it was basically in disrepair. So it's like there was this little small section of the city that it had just accepted, like, yeah, it's crappy, but we're not going to do anything about it. It's poor people. So that was Rubberville. And unfortunately, what happens in areas of poverty is that when there's no hope through traditional means, you find people of color flocking towards groups or leaders that will accept them. And many times that's gangs, or it was when I was growing up, especially in Racine. So we had a lot of gang members that would come to Silver Park too. But the thing is, Silver Park was almost like if you've seen Luke Cage in the past when it came out on the Netflix series, it was like Pops. Basically, this Silver Park was almost neutral ground for the most part, but you knew everybody was something there. And yeah, sometimes it would get weird. So I remember, so we would mostly have GD and Latin Kings that would come to Silver Park, sometimes at the same time. And there was never really that they never again, Silver Park was more of a like neutral ground, so nobody really caused anything at the park. Outside of the park, bets were off pretty much. So when I was about 9 or 10, one of the Latin Kings I knew from the park, I was just swinging on the swings or something. He comes running out of an alley near the park, and he's kind of looking back and looking around. And then he rolls up on me and he's like, kind of panting. He's like, dude, you'll never guess what happened to me. Now, I'm 9, he was about 14. Um, and he proceeds to tell me that he just shot somebody, but he dropped his gun. So now he's running. So that's why he's looking back. And I'm like, okay, is he just messing with me? And then he jokingly, he's like, yeah, but I'm going to take you with me. And he drags me. And I'm like, okay. And then he let me go. And he was just like, no, I'm just joking. Just don't tell anybody I was here. And I was like, okay. And then he walks off. And I'm like, maybe he was just messing with me. 2 minutes later, a cop car rolls up. And now there are 3 neighborhood girls that are around me, little white girls, which is important because of the next second half of this little tale or trip down memory lane, is that when the cops pulled up and asked if we had seen somebody matching his description, I realized, oh, legitimately, this is a real situation. And now I need to respond in a way like this is a legitimate situation. And for me, what that meant is say nothing. And this is why. Sober Park, we all knew pretty much where each other lived because most of us lived within half a block of the park. So, ratting out somebody, especially a gang member, realizing that, for one, frowned upon, 2, they know where you are. No, not worth it. Just not worth it. So me knowing that calculation, having had it explained to me by my brother, you know, and just having that, I guess, as a reality I knew, immediately I'm just like, no, I haven't seen him. But the 3 girls were sitting there like, oh yeah, we just saw him go that way. And I think I like quietly, like, was like, guys, shut up. And then like when the cops pulled away, I was like, guys, let me just say this. And honestly, this is what I said. This is exactly what I said to him because I'll never forget it. I was like, guys, he knows where you live. He knows where we all live. And I walked away. Like I just went off home. So yeah, that kind of explains this kind of, there is a nature to childhood where we try to keep children from being exposed to reality. So we make the world seem less harmful, or we try to sugarcoat dangers. But it's weird because children are exposed to these things. And if you're not teaching them the reality of these things, they don't know the reality or consequences for their possible reaction or what they do in that situation. So a lot of people wind up getting in situations that will either get them hurt or killed because yes, they want to do the right thing. And the truth is, I did the wrong thing. The right thing would have been to give them the information so they could have got him. That's the right thing. The right thing is to make sure that people are brought to justice for their crimes. That is the right thing. But when stacking the possible well-being of your family, yourself, or your friends against the reward of knowing that the right thing was done or justice was served, yeah, I'm sure that will be comforting, but that knowledge doesn't bring the people that you put in harm's way and potentially got hurt or killed back. You're taking a risk and a leap on behalf of a justice system that traditionally has not taken any leaps on you and you know is going to let you down. So yeah, that's the kind of experience those are the kind of thoughts or calculations that I had to make as a child sometimes. very adult moments buried in the, "Yay, let's go play and act like I don't know all the things I know." And I think a lot of kids deal with that, especially in Racine and probably in Kenosha. And we try to act like that's not a reality. Oh, we'll just give them more activities. We'll do that. No, no. Oh, let's just beautify the area. No, you have to change the opportunity. You have to change the level of everything. Kids know. I guess that's my point in that tale is kids know. Kids know more than you think they do. And it's stupid to try to act like they don't. I guess the second example that I can think of when it was another weird moment where you kind of break the fourth wall of childhood, but this was later in life. By later in life, this was like 7 years later. Besides the whole incident with the Latin King and the alley. So when I was about 15, 16, at the end of my block, uh, there was an old couple living in a house. And one night, somebody broke in and stabbed them to death. Stabbed them so many times each that the blade broke off in one of them. They then stole their car, um, and apparently drove around with it. Um, so that kind of shocked the neighborhood because you were used to that happening down by the lake on like Villa Park, those kind of things. 16th and Villa, Um, I think is where somebody I knew got shot in the neck when I was a kid. Anyway, it was not something that happened in that particular part of Racine, the little bubble neighborhood that I grew up in, kind of. So it was kind of horrifying. It was horrifying. My parents were scared. They started, and that's why we moved to Kenosha when I was 16, to get away from that kind of thing. But the story actually gets much more personal and much weirder for my family. You see, so it was about a day or so after this murder that an officer knocks on our door. And my mother opens the door, and he's just kind of going around and asking people if they saw anything and getting details. And my mother, we hadn't seen my brother Nate for a few days, so my mother just like, well, my sons Nate and Matt were up late. Maybe they saw something. And the officer said, "Oh, we've already spoken to your son Nate." Turns out my brother Nate was in jail for an unrelated thing. And they had spoken to him there, which solved the mystery of where Nate was. Um, but I remember, so after that, so Nate gets home like a day, a little bit. Well, I don't remember, within a week, and he's telling us about his experience in there. And later that evening, his cellmate from his stint uh, comes over because they had become friends. And this man's happy. He's there with a woman, his fiance. He had just recently proposed, and he's showing off, you know, the ring that he got her and everything like that. And they're all so happy, and man, I'm so happy for you and all this. Like a day or two later, we're watching the news, and suddenly this man's face is on the TV screen. And then we turn up the sound, and it turns out this man, who had been my brother's cellmate, who had been in my house 2 days prior, who I had interacted with, This happy person looking on their bright future is the same person that had brutally stabbed that old couple to death. He had been in jail with my brother because he got caught for an unrelated warrant. The whole time they had been looking for him, he was already in custody. In fact, when they told my brother, or questioned him about it, he came back and told this man that he wishes he knew who he was because he would tell them. And he was saying that to the man who did it. And we all met him. And he seemed so nice. So that was kind of another glass shattering moment of just, you never know who someone really is. Those are moments that stand out from like what I'd say my early years. But, the thing that I think has defined my life also is music. So from a very young age, so when I was like 4, I would swing on my little swing set in my backyard and I would make up songs. Like every day, I would just be making up different songs about random stuff. I was one of those children. People probably thought there was something wrong with me. Between that and the fact that my mother told me within the past 2 years, as a child, you know what I used to do? Sometimes she would look out the window. I would just be laying on my back, staring up at the sky, motionless. And she came out one day and she was like, Daniel, what are you doing? You know what my response was? Oh, I'm just playing dead. Just wonder what it would be like. Mom, she did. She just let me do that. What? Seriously? All right. But no, I mean, I've always been kind of a creative and odd person. Like I'm weird. I am horribly weird. I'm the weirdest person some of you will ever meet. I accept that. I also have reached a point in life that I don't care. I'm just me. Whatever. I'm an acquired taste. I'm cool with that. But the thing that I've always flocked to, because there's freedom for people like me in it, is music. And when I was 16, 17, I started my first band, my first real band. I mean, I was in a band when I was like 14 or 15, but we never played a show and it sucked. So my real first effort was when I was 16 or 17. And at that point, I called it High Time Society. It was me, Adam Pronto, and Nate Daniels. And up to that point, I was also playing basketball because sports was a major part of my life. I'd gone to Bucks games as a kid and things like that, and I loved the sport, but ultimately it came down to either playing the sport or music, and I chose music. So for years we would play shows here and there, and this is back when Kenosha wasn't Kenosha. Um, Back when Kenosha wasn't such a music scene. And I guess it's a longer story to explain the music aspect of my life than to shove it all together into a brief recap. So I'm going to leave you here for today. And tomorrow, I'll pick up with you again. And let's talk about my music career and how, in many ways, it saved my life.